Mr. Garage here, and we're working on the Project Warrior again today, and it is like 100 degrees. It's going to be 110 today. It's hot, but we're going to get some stuff done. So let's show you what we're going to do. Alright, so we're finally getting at the back half of this guy, and that's going to be the whole swing arm project and carrier project. You can see how nasty and rusted this is, so we're going to take off our skid plate, our chain. We're going to pull this bent axle. My new axle finally came in after being lost with UPS for almost a month. It finally got here, and it's okay. It's actually in one piece, surprisingly. But yeah, this thing is a rusty, crusty mess. So we're going to pull all this apart, pull the whole swing arm off, take the carrier off, and we're probably going to use a bead blaster and clean all of the rust off the swing arm and get it repainted and kind of refurbish it. We've got new chain. We're going to have to clean up the bolt and nut assembly there. I mean, it's just kind of nasty. This thing is a mess. So we've got a lot of work to do. And yeah, we're going to be taking this whole back end apart. And that's going to be, I think, our project for this weekend is getting the back end ready to go and new chain on. Okay, so our clip for the chain is actually so crusty and rusted on. I'm just going to grind off one of our pins here, one of our rivets, and I've got just a Pit Boss chain breaker tool set that I use quite a bit. So this is a little chain breaker piece. So we're going to grind one of these off, and then we're going to go ahead and push one of these pins out so we can break the chain, and we'll pull this gross old chain off. So there we go. Alright, so the next thing we do, let's see if I got the right wrench here. No telling if I do. That looks like it'll work. We've got this little tool here. Now this we're going to kind of put up against the chain so you can kind of see how I'm adjusting it. And then this back piece will push a little steel pin and drive out our rivet. So let's see if I can get this adjusted just right. I'm going to put it like this. Okay, we got it on. And you heard that pop. That was actually the pin being driven out of the chain. This thing is pretty, and there's a hole in this side, you can't see it, but so it's pushing our little chain pin. It's going to push it straight out this hole on the other side. And then we can just yank this chain right off. This is one nasty chain. Alright, well, my son's sneezing in the background. Alright. See if we can get this all out. There we go. I need some pliers, boss. There we go. Thank you. That one didn't quite push all the way out. Looks like it's just barely stuck on the end. There we go. Alright, so you can see how it drove the pin out. And now, get this old rusty crusty chain out of here. And something happened. We're stuck. There we go. Alright. That's gone. Next up, we're going to be taking off our sprocket. We have a bunch of these little safety tabs here, so we're going to have to bend each of these back. We'll take each of these bolts off. We'll take our sprocket off. We need to get our brake caliper off. We're going to get our brake rotor off. Then we're going to take off our axle nuts, and we should be able to kind of get this whole axle out of here. After we do that, we got to get our skid plate off, and then we can work on actually pulling the swing arm itself. So we'll be back here in just a little bit because this is kind of self-explanatory. Removing bolts. We got a couple caliper bolts, and we're going to take off with the Allens our brake rotor on the other side. So we'll be back here in just a little bit. All right, so 2 of these are stripped out. These brake caliper bolts, they were really chewed up when we got to them, and we put heat on them with a torch, did everything we could so far, and we're still not getting anywhere. So I'm going to reapply some heat, and then I'm going to use what we call PARROT pliers, CHANNELLOCK brand PARROT pliers. I'm going to see if I can grab onto those and get those to break loose. So let's put some more heat on them. Threw a little screwdriver in here just to wedge it, and all I can do is hope we're going to be able to grab onto these enough to break them loose. I think we got them. There we go. These PARROT pliers will grab onto almost anything, and if you don't have a set in your toolbox, you need a set. The way the jaws are and the way the teeth are shaped, they'll grab onto strip bolts or whatever you want to grab onto. And you can see kind of on here how hard they dig into the metal. So that'll let us get this out. We'll have to replace these bolts, not a big deal. And yeah, I just thought that might help some of you guys out to see this tool. Alright, so that was a long boring process of a lot of hammering and penetrant oil trying to get all of this apart, but we got it all apart. Of course, the old axle, it was pretty rusty and crusty, so one of the collars that goes on, that slips on, actually it's this guy, this goes here like this, that was rusted on. Took quite a bit to get that off. The bearings were seized on, took quite a bit to get those off, and those things were absolutely trashed. Our carrier was pretty gross inside. Bearings were seized in. We used a air hammer to knock the other side out after we got the axle itself out. It pulls out, if you're looking at the back of the quad, it pulls out the right side, the axle, and then I had to use an air hammer to knock the other bearing out. But our sprocket holder piece, that came out nice. So the swing arm itself came out nice, even though it looks terrible. It's just pretty much surface rust on this, not a big deal. Got our little nuts and bolts out of there. We got to clean all that up. We have our seal caps. These little seal caps just go on the end of this swing arm, and this is the bearing assembly itself. So this goes all the way through the inside, and then you have these little needle bearing cartridges that sit just inside, and they just kind of got to be knocked out. And both of mine are actually pretty good. I was surprised. These are in really good shape. We're going to simple green them, get them completely cleaned up and rinsed really well, and we'll re-grease these and reuse these. So I'm happy these were good because I didn't order them. I thought they might be good, but on a hope, because I didn't want to spend 50 bucks, but those are good. We've got this little joint for the shock. That thing's just nasty, rusty, and crusty. We're going to clean that up and get that painted. And of course, we're going to clean up our skid plate. So yeah, that's all the parts really for what we have going on this project. Kind of see them all there. And these had never been maintained. I mean, there's almost no grease in them. They're completely dry, but that's what happens. I mean, quads just get the heck beat out of them, and I think I've done that to a quad or two myself, so it is what it is. There's our old axle, and we've got our nice new axle, and our crusty old chain. And see the old shock up in there. We're going to probably clean up a little bit of that metal, some of that rust that I'm seeing up in there. Going to clean that up. And I've got some new chain rollers. That's the upper chain roller right in the center there. That one's still intact, but I'm going to replace that. And that one's completely gone, the lower chain roller, so I'm going to get that replaced too. Overall, really not that big of a deal. We just got some rust to clean up, some metal to clean up, and yeah, that's about it. And I do have to get some new bolts for the sprocket that, or I'm sorry, the brake rotor we had to take off, because again we use those PARROT pliers to get these bolts out, so we got some new bolts to get. But well, that's going to be it. So we're going to go take all of these parts, we're going to put them in this big bucket here, fill it with simple green, and we're going to start getting all this stuff degreased. So, and then we'll be back once we got the parts cleaned. I'm going to get out an abrasive blaster. We're going to get all the rust off this rear swing arm, get that all cleaned up and ready for paint. And yeah, I mean, pretty simple process. Talk to you guys soon. All right, so that is my spot blaster. It's like a portable sand blaster, and we use that to get all the rust off the rear carrier. All that we could get off. May still show a little bit, but we got this sucker off, all the rust, so we got to sand it up real good. We're going to use some primer and repaint this. Swing arm, same way. You remember how rusty that thing was just a little bit ago when I was showing you guys. Use my little portable spot blaster. We got all the nasty, crusty, real heavy rust off the swing arm. We're gonna degrease this further, clean it up further. We got to rinse it out because there's a lot of aluminum oxide in it, and which is the media we used. And got that cleaned up. We'll get that primed and painted. And we have our little linkage here. See if I can get that in the sun. But that thing was rusty and crusty too. We got that all blasted and cleaned, and we got to get, you know, of course, these little end piece seals, we got to get these brushed up and cleaned up, and we'll get those painted along with it. But overall, yeah, everything's turning out really good so far. My son's back there cleaning the skid plate, filing the skid plate. So hold out the skid plate, bud. Flip it over. Yeah, I mean, that's coming around, just getting it all cleaned up and all the yuck off of it. I mean, it's gonna have a lot of gouges on it, obviously. It's a friggin' skid plate, but it's looking a whole lot better. It's got all the discoloration and yellowing off the aluminum. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now, is we're just cleaning and getting everything prepped up and ready to reassemble here probably tomorrow. We'll let the paint dry, let all the cleanup get done, and then we'll reassemble tomorrow. All right, so what we've been up to is, after we got everything degreased, prepped, and cleaned up, we have got our swing arm all set. I mean, that thing looks great. We've got our carrier housing all stripped down and repainted, our little bracket. Yeah, I mean, we're real happy with this. So what we used was Rust-Oleum. It's 7271 silver metallic. It's an anti-rust type paint. This stuff matches the factory kind of silver Yamaha pretty darn well. We're real happy with it. But yeah, so we're gonna keep on prepping and getting everything set up, and we'll be reassembling hopefully tomorrow. Mr. Grouch here, and we did this whole entire video for you guys, assembling the hub, doing all this stuff, and it's so hot out here right now. My phone overheated apparently in 15 seconds being in the sun. That's how hot it is in Arizona right now. And no video footage was recorded. We are ticked because we're not going to disassemble all this to reassemble it, but we're going to kind of go really quickly and kind of show you what we did really fast. So sorry about that. One of those days. Okay, so we're going to start out with the swing arm. We greased our bearings up really good, pressed it in. The main pin that rides down through the swing arm, the main body, we got that all greased up, lubed up really good, and that just drops into place. And then our painted end caps we put over the end. Now this side has just a nylon roller that kind of flops around. That's part of the chain guide system. Over here we have our carrier, our rebuilt carrier. So we've got our NTN bearings in there, we got our seals in there. All we did was drive the bearings in with our bearing set. That was piece of cake. We just kind of knocked them in or tapped them in, and then put the seal in. We put our center, there's a large piece of steel, it's like a piece of steel pipe that goes right in the center. It's kind of like a spacer to prevent the bearings from collapsing on themselves when you tighten the axle nuts. But we put that in, and then we tapped our seals in, so that was done. That just ticks me off. We lost all that footage, but you know what? It is what it is. So the next up, we've got to do some cleanup. We have our two, right there is a lower bearing roller post or a chain roller post, and we have an upper. And I've got two of these nylon just roller guides, and I've got one from Pro X and one from All Balls. The one from All Balls was half the price, and it comes with a sticker, and both of these visually are made in the same factory somewhere overseas, because they are absolutely 100% identical. All Balls, again, was half the price, comes with a sticker, so that's where my money is next time. That's it. We're going to go ahead and clean these up, clean these roller guides up, and get these installed, and then we're going to go ahead and mount up our swing arm up in our Project Warrior. Alright, so that was a crusty difference on this chain roller pin. So I used red Scotch-Brite in a circular pattern, kind of go with the grooves. We don't grease these. Again, nylon is self-lubricating. Can I have a bushing, Bob? And put that on, and that literally just kind of does that. I mean, that's all there is to it. It's just a roller guide for when the chain hits it. We'll do the same thing to the upper and get that all cleaned up, and we'll move on to our next step. All right, so my son and I, we've got the whole back end done. I mean, this thing is nice now. Everything's been rebuilt. It's super smooth. I'm unsure on these. I may need to get new hardware for this because I really don't like these little bin tabs, but I may go ahead and reuse those. We'll see. Got our rollers on, got everything all ready to go, and we realized our chain, they sent us the wrong length chain. We got a 94 link chain. We actually need a 98 link chain, so I'm kind of ticked about that, but whatever. Let's see, the next project we're going to do, something that's kind of common on these Warriors, is this connector, this 3-pin overheats, and let's see if you can see it. Eventually all the plastic on one side rots out until the pin's exposed. So we're going to replace that connector. I've got a Deutsch 3-pin setup rated at 20 amps here. We're going to replace this connector with the Deutsch pin setup. And other than that, we put on our shock covers because I'm really tired of seeing the pink shock. So that's looking really good. We've got new hardware we got to get in for the brake rotor. We've only got 2 bolts in it right now, but we got new hardware coming in for that. Let's see. My son put on our front shock covers, even though they're on backwards right now. They just say shock cover. It matches the blue. That's all I cared about. Came off Amazon, so it's kind of generic. And we got our front bumper that we kind of refurbished and got bent all straight, if you can see it in there. Got it all, kind of all the metal reworked and so forth, so that looks good. But yeah, I think today we're going to wrap up with this electrical bit. We may put on parts of the handlebars and get some of that done, run our new clutch cable, and I think we may be done for the day. Well, you know what, we'll probably put on some front plastics just to feel accomplished. So we'll be back after a little while. Alright, you can kind of see better here the electrical issue that I'm talking about. So we're going to repin this. Luckily it's color for color on this harness. But what happens is water or whatever gets inside this connector and resistance builds up because the connector starts corroding, and it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter until the plastic goes to hell, and then over time it just kind of disintegrates. So this is the only connector I know of on the Warrior that does this, disintegrates itself. The other ones kind of stay intact. So we'll get this one apart and we'll get this new connector on. Alright, so we got our new Deutsch connector in and on and locked together, so we're good to go there. Every other connector on this entire Warrior we have to take apart, relays, everything. We need to use dielectric grease inside every single solitary connector on this to make sure these cables stay corrosion free, well, as much as possible. And we also need to take that ground bolt out, and we're going to make sure that the ground is very good on there and there's no paint under it or corrosion, and we're going to re-ground that ground bolt. So that's what we're going to do on the electrical. We'll be back in a little bit. So yeah, we got a lot done today. Our Warrior project is starting to look like a Warrior again, instead of like part of a motorcycle with no plastics. But we got our nice little seat cover on. It's kind of dusty, but we recovered, so that looks really nice. Got a lot of the handlebars assembled. We're missing a few pieces. We don't have some clamps. We got to replace screws and hardware. We don't have a clamp for the brake reservoir to clamp onto the bars. Again, we got to place a lot of hardware. Our switch, we actually bought a brand new switch, but that hasn't come in yet. It's been on back order for quite a while. But yeah, it's actually starting to resemble a Warrior. I got to get the headlight bracket painted, but it was just nice to get all the plastics on and bumper on and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And our swing arm's done, and we just did a lot of little odds and ends after the electrical today. But yeah, pretty happy with this thing. I mean, it's going to be good once we get it all set up. So all right, well, I appreciate you guys watching. I will catch you later on.